The beginning of an unforgettable evening, Keanu Reeves was known by millions as a humble star, a man who carried pain but still gave kindness to strangers. Sandra Bullock was admired for her strength, her humor, and her ability to keep her heart soft even after many storms. Both had been friends for years, but that evening something felt different. The world outside saw them as celebrities, but inside they were just two people searching for something real. The question that kept people watching was simple. What would happen when these two gentle souls sat together, not as stars, but as human beings? It started on a quiet evening in Los Angeles. The sky was painted orange and purple, the kind of sunset that makes people stop their cars just to take a picture. Sandra had agreed to meet Keanu for dinner. It was not a glamorous restaurant with flashing lights. Instead, he had chosen a small place near the beach, known only by locals. Keanu believed that the best moments happened when no one was looking, and Sandra understood that better than anyone. As Sandra walked toward the entrance, she saw Keanu waiting outside. He was wearing a simple black jacket, his hair slightly messy, his smile calm but shy. There were no bodyguards, no cameras, only the sound of waves in the distance. Sandra felt a sudden warmth. It reminded her of the first time they had met years ago, when both were nervous on set, yet comforted by each other's kindness. The moment they sat down, the evening turned into something deeper. Keanu leaned forward and asked softly, "How are you really doing?" It was not the usual polite question people asked. It was the kind that made someone pause and open their heart. Sandra laughed lightly at first, trying to hide her emotions, but then her eyes turned misty. She admitted how heavy life had felt lately, how being strong all the time sometimes broke her from the inside. Keanu listened without interrupting, his eyes gentle, his hands resting quietly on the table. Then he shared his own struggles, the loneliness he often felt despite all the love from fans, the quiet nights when he wondered if kindness was enough in a world that could be so cruel. His voice carried no bitterness, only truth. Sandra's heart tightened as she realized how similar their hidden battles were. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen. A young waiter had dropped a tray of glasses, and the sound echoed across the small room. People turned their heads. Some shook their own in annoyance, but Keanu stood up immediately. Instead of being upset, he walked over to the nervous waiter who was close to tears. He knelt down, helped pick up the broken pieces, and whispered something that made the boy smile again. Sandra watched in silence, her heart swelling with respect. This was the man people admired, not because of fame, but because he never forgot to be human. When Keanu returned to the table, Sandra said quietly, "You never change, do you?" He smiled faintly and replied, "The world gives us enough reasons to be hard. I think being kind is the only way to survive." Those words hung in the air, soft but powerful, and Sandra felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. Their food arrived, but the meal was not what touched them. It was the silence between words, the way they understood each other without speaking. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world had disappeared. But just as the calm settled in, another twist came. Outside, a group of strangers had noticed them. Whispers spread, cameras began to rise, and the quiet evening threatened to turn into chaos. Sandra's heart raced. She hated being followed, hated how private moments turned into headlines. But before panic could take over, Keanu reached across the table and held her hand. His eyes met hers, steady and calm. "We don't have to run," he said softly. "Let's just be ourselves. If they see us, let them see kindness." The suspense in the air was heavy. Would they stay? Would they leave? No one knew what was about to happen. But one thing was certain. The night was only beginning, and what followed would touch everyone who heard the story. When the quiet night turned into a test, the quiet evening they had hoped for was slipping away. The soft laughter, the gentle talk, the peaceful dinner. It all trembled when a small group of strangers outside the restaurant noticed them. One camera light flickered like a firefly, then another. Soon, the glow of phones reflected against the window. Sandra's chest tightened. She had lived this before. Private moments stolen, her face twisted into stories that weren't true. Keanu noticed the fear in her eyes, and he gave her hand a small squeeze. His calm presence was like an anchor. Stay with me, he whispered. Don't look at them. Look at me! Sandra tried to breathe slowly, but the noise outside grew louder. People whispered his name. Some even shouted. A few children pressed their hands against the glass, not knowing they were interrupting something fragile. And then it happened. The restaurant door opened. A man rushed inside with his phone raised, ignoring the staff who tried to stop him. For a moment, the entire room froze. The other guests stared. The waiter who had dropped the glasses earlier looked nervous again, and Sandra's hands trembled on the table. Keanu stood slowly, his posture straight but humble. Instead of anger, he walked toward the man with a small nod. Please, Keanu said softly. This is a quiet place. People are eating. You'll disturb them. The man expected resistance, maybe even a scene. But Keanu's gentle tone made him hesitate. Still, the phone stayed raised. Sandra felt her heart pound as she waited for Keanu to lose his patience. But he didn't. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a pen, and said, If it means that much, I can sign something for you outside. But let's not disturb the others in here. The man blinked, lowered his phone, and for a moment looked embarrassed. The waiter quickly guided him out. Sandra let out the breath she had been holding, her eyes following Keanu as he returned. When he sat down again, she whispered, How do you do that? How do you stay calm when people try to break your peace? Keanu smiled faintly. I can't control what people do, but I can control how I respond. If I give anger, they'll carry it home. If I give kindness, maybe they'll think twice the next time. His words sank deep into her heart. It wasn't just wisdom. It was resilience built through pain and loss. Sandra thought of her own battles, the times she had been misunderstood, the times she wished someone had spoken gently instead of harshly. She realized then that this dinner wasn't just about friendship. It was about learning from each other's scars. The evening moved on, but the tension lingered. Outside, the small crowd stayed. Flashes of light flickered against the window now and then. But something unexpected happened inside the restaurant. An elderly couple at the next table leaned toward them and said, We didn't mean to overhear, but we just want to say thank you. It's rare to see someone handle things the way you just did. The woman had kind eyes, her wrinkled hands resting on her husband's arm. Her voice trembled with honesty. Keanu smiled and bowed his head, but Sandra noticed his eyes glisten. Those words had reached him. Just then, the waiter returned, still looking shaken from earlier. He confessed quietly, I'm sorry for all this. I should have stopped them sooner. I don't want you to leave with a bad memory. Keanu looked at him with kindness and said, Don't blame yourself. Life throws things at us we can't control. What matters is how we stand back up. You did fine. He paused, then added, What's your name? The boy answered softly. Liam. Keanu shook his hand warmly. Thank you, Liam. You're doing your best. That's enough. Sandra felt tears press against her eyes again. She knew this wasn't a performance. Keanu's kindness was real, natural, almost like breathing. But the night wasn't done testing them. As they prepared to leave, they realized the crowd outside had grown larger. Sandra hesitated at the door. Whispers grew louder, phones flashed brighter, and someone shouted, Are they on a date? Sandra froze. Her heart pounded with the fear of being judged again, of headlines twisting something pure into something ugly. Keanu stepped closer, his hand brushing gently against hers. He whispered, Don't hide. Walk with me. They will see what we choose to show them. And so, with trembling steps, Sandra walked out beside him into the sea of flashing lights. The suspense was heavy. What would happen in the next few minutes would decide if their evening ended in chaos or in something unforgettable. The crowd and the choice. The door opened and a wave of sound hit them. Cameras flashed like lightning. Voices rose like waves crashing against rocks. Sandra tightened her grip on Keanu's hand without thinking. She hated this part, the way people's curiosity could turn warm moments into fear. Keanu, however, did not rush. He paused just outside the door, letting the cool night air brush over his face. His calmness spread to Sandra, even though her chest still felt heavy. He glanced at her and whispered, Breathe. It's just people. Let's give them something real. The crowd pressed closer. One voice shouted, Keanu, are you and Sandra together? Another laughed. Give us a smile. We need a headline. Sandra wanted to turn back, to run inside and hide, but Keanu stepped forward. Instead of ignoring them, he stopped right at the edge of the crowd. He raised his hand not to silence them, but to greet them. "Good evening," he said in his gentle tone. "I know you're excited, but please remember, people inside are trying to eat. Respect them, and I promise we will not walk away." His words surprised everyone. The shouting softened. Some phones lowered. The children who had been peeking earlier stood on their toes, curious. Then came the unexpected twist. A young boy squeezed through the crowd holding a small notebook. His clothes were worn, his face a little pale, but his eyes shone with hope. He looked nervous as he lifted the notebook toward Keanu. "Can you sign this for me?" he asked shyly. Before Keanu could answer, a man from the crowd barked, "Move, kid, you're blocking the shot." The boy flinched, his notebook almost falling. Sandra's heart ached. She took a step forward, shielding the boy with her hand. "Don't talk to him like that," she said firmly, her voice sharper than before. Keanu crouched down to meet the boy's eyes. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy whispered. Keanu smiled softly and took the notebook. Instead of just signing, he wrote something longer, his pen moving slowly but steady. When he handed it back, the boy's face lit up. Ethan whispered, "Thank you. My dad lost his job and it's been hard, but I watch your movies with him. It makes him smile again." Silence spread through the crowd. The noise, the flashing, the shouting, all faded. People were reminded that behind every question, behind every camera, there were human hearts and struggles. Sandra looked at Keanu, her throat tight with emotion. She realized this was why he never lost patience. He saw the human being before the noise. As they began to walk again, a few people stepped back respectfully. The mood of the crowd shifted. The shouting turned into soft murmurs. Some even clapped quietly, not for fame, but for the kindness they had just witnessed. But the night was not finished with them yet. As they reached the car, Sandra noticed a woman standing apart from the crowd. Her face was tired, her arms full of grocery bags, one of them torn with items spilling out. People were too focused on Keanu and Sandra to notice her struggle. Without hesitation, Keanu walked over and bent down to help pick up the groceries. The cameras followed, but this time the flashes caught something real. A man kneeling on the sidewalk, helping a stranger gather apples and bread. The woman looked shocked. "You don't need to," Keanu smiled gently. "It's no trouble. Everyone needs a hand sometimes." Sandra's heart swelled again. She joined him, gathering the scattered items and placing them back in the bag. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Thank you. You both. Thank you." By now, the crowd was silent, watching not stars, but people who chose kindness. Keanu stood, brushed his hands, and finally opened the car door for Sandra. Before getting in, she turned to the crowd. Her voice was soft but steady. "We're all human. Don't forget that." The suspense of the evening had turned into something none of them expected. Instead of chaos, the night was giving them moments of truth, moments that touched hearts. But still, a bigger test was waiting, one that would push both Keanu and Sandra to reveal even more of themselves. The storm inside their hearts. The car ride was quiet at first. Sandra looked out the window, watching the city lights blur like stars falling. Her heart was heavy. The kindness they had shown outside had touched people, but inside she felt something else. She felt exposed, vulnerable, almost fragile. Keanu noticed her silence. His voice was calm, but it carried concern. "Are you okay?" Sandra hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Part of me feels proud of how we handled it, but another part of me is tired. No matter what we do, people will still turn it into a story. I'm scared of being misunderstood again." Her words trembled. For years, she had faced rumors, harsh headlines, false stories. She was strong on the outside, but inside, those wounds still ached. Keanu listened quietly, his eyes on the road. Finally, he said softly, "I understand. I've lived through that too. They don't see our truth, they see their version, but we can't let their version destroy us." His words were steady, but Sandra caught the sadness in his tone. She turned to him. "You've been through worse, haven't you?" Keanu didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and his grip on the wheel grew firmer. After a pause, he spoke. I've lost people I loved. I've seen my private pain turned into gossip. There were nights when I felt like disappearing, but I chose to keep going. I chose kindness because anger only makes the darkness grow. The weight of his confession filled the car. Sandra felt tears sting her eyes. She reached out and touched his hand gently. You don't have to carry it alone, you know. Before he could reply, thunder rumbled in the distance. The sky cracked open and rain began to pour heavily against the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up as the road glistened under the streetlights. It was as if the night itself was echoing their emotions. They pulled over near a quiet park to wait out the storm. The rain drummed loudly on the roof, surrounding them in a cocoon of sound. Sandra leaned back, closing her eyes. Sometimes I wish I could just be invisible. No cameras, no expectations, no masks. Just me. Keanu looked at her, his face softening. I think the real you is already here. Kind, brave, stronger than you know. People may not always see it, but I do. Her chest tightened at his words. No one had said it like that before, not as a compliment, but as truth. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the window startled them. Sandra gasped. Keanu quickly lowered the glass. A drenched young woman stood outside, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She looked desperate. I'm sorry, she said breathlessly. My car broke down on the other side of the road. I don't know what to do. Keanu didn't hesitate. He opened his door and stepped out into the pouring rain. Sandra called after him. Keanu, wait, you'll get soaked. But he only gave her a small smile and said, She needs help. Sandra sighed, then followed him, pulling her jacket over her head. Together, they reached the woman's car. Smoke rose faintly from under the hood. The woman looked close to tears. I was on my way to the hospital. My mother's inside. She's very sick. I can't be late. Keanu bent down, checking quickly under the hood, rain dripping down his face. This won't run right now, he said firmly. Come with us. We'll take you. The woman's eyes widened. Really? But you're just people, Sandra interrupted gently. Get in. Back in the car, Sandra sat with the woman while Keanu drove through the storm. The woman clutched her hands together, whispering prayers. Sandra asked softly, What's your mother's name? Linda, the woman replied. She's all I have. I'm scared. Sandra squeezed her hand. You're not alone tonight. We'll get you there. The hospital lights appeared through the rain. Keanu pulled up quickly and they helped the woman rush inside. She turned before disappearing through the doors, her voice breaking with gratitude. Thank you. Both of you. You don't know what this means. Sandra stood in the rain, her hair damp, her eyes glistening. She turned to Keanu, whispering, You didn't even think twice. You just acted. Keanu gave a small shrug, water running down his face. Sometimes life gives us chances to show what really matters. We can't waste them. They stood there, rain soaking them, hearts heavy yet strangely lighter. For a moment, it felt like the storm outside had washed something clean inside them, too. But deep down, Sandra knew the night wasn't done. Storms never end without one final test. The truth in the hospital. The rain slowed as they stood outside the hospital, water dripping from their hair and jackets. Sandra shivered slightly, but her heart was warm from what they had just done. She glanced at Keanu. Even soaked in the storm, his presence felt steady, almost like a shelter. They walked inside, their shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Nurses moved quickly, doctors gave orders, and families sat in the waiting area with worry etched on their faces. Sandra sat down, brushing her damp hair back, while Keanu went to check with the receptionist about the young woman they had helped. He returned a few minutes later, his expression thoughtful. Her mother's in intensive care, he said quietly. They let her in to see her? Sandra sighed, her chest heavy. I hope we got her here in time. They sat together in silence, watching the busy room. The waiting area was filled with stories of fear, pain, and love, parents clutching children, an elderly man holding his wife's hand, a boy sitting alone with worry in his eyes. Sandra's throat tightened as she realized how fragile life could be. Suddenly, a small voice spoke near them. Are you Keanu Reeves? They turned. It was the same boy who had been sitting alone. He looked around, 10 years old, his shoes slightly worn, a sketchbook resting on his lap. His eyes were wide but kind. Keanu nodded gently. Yes, I am. What's your name? Ryan, the boy said softly. My dad is sick. He's in there. He pointed toward the closed doors of the emergency ward. He used to tell me that when he watched your movies, it made him forget the pain for a little while. I wanted to tell you. Thank you. Sandra's eyes grew misty. She saw the way Keanu knelt down to meet the boy's gaze, his expression soft and respectful. Thank you for telling me, Ryan, Keanu said. Your dad sounds brave. You must be brave too, waiting here for him. Ryan's lip trembled. I try, but sometimes I'm scared. Without hesitation, Keanu placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you love him. And that's the strongest thing there is. Sandra felt her chest ache as she watched. Then Ryan opened his sketchbook, showing a rough drawing of a superhero. I was drawing this for my dad. He says heroes are the ones who show up when you need them. Keanu studied the drawing carefully, then whispered, Your dad is right. And you know what? You're already a hero to him. Tears welled in the boy's eyes. Sandra quickly wiped her own, not wanting the boy to see her cry. Just then, a nurse came out of the intensive care area. She walked over to the boy and said, Ryan, your dad wants to see you. Come with me. Ryan looked up at Keanu nervously. Can you wait here until I come back? Keanu smiled warmly. Of course. We'll be right here. The boy followed the nurse, clutching his sketchbook tightly. Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice trembling. You didn't just comfort him. You gave him strength. Do you even realize what you do for people? Keanu lowered his head slightly, his voice quiet. I only gave what I wish someone had given me when I was his age. His words stunned Sandra. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the young woman they had helped earlier rushed toward them, her eyes filled with tears. My mother, she whispered, breathless. She woke up. The doctor said if I had been any later, it could have been different. You saved her. Her voice cracked, and she clutched Sandra's hands tightly. You don't know what this means. I almost lost her tonight. Sandra pulled her into a hug, her heart swelling. Keanu gave a small nod, his eyes glistening, though he tried to hide it. The hospital, filled with its noise and tension, suddenly felt like the center of something greater. Two strangers had found hope again because Keanu and Sandra chose to stop, to care, to act. But the night still carried one more twist. As they prepared to leave, a doctor walked up to Keanu, his expression both respectful and cautious. Mr. Reeves, the doctor said softly, I hope you don't mind me saying this. Years ago, when we were struggling to fund the children's ward here, someone made a large anonymous donation. Tonight, when I saw you helping that woman in the rain, I realized it was you, wasn't it? Sandra froze, her eyes widening. She turned to Keanu in shock. Keanu's face remained calm, but his silence was an answer. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. The doctor gave him a small bow of respect. You saved this ward. Countless children were treated because of that gift, and yet no one ever knew. Sandra felt her heart pound. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, Keanu, why didn't you tell anyone? He looked at her quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Because kindness doesn't need headlines. It only needs hands. Sandra lowered her head, overwhelmed by emotion. In that moment, she realized the world saw Keanu as a star. But she had just seen the real man, the one whose quiet kindness had already changed countless lives. The final moment that touched everyone. The hospital corridors were still buzzing, but for Keanu and Sandra, time felt slower. The doctor's words about the anonymous donation echoed in Sandra's heart. She looked at Keanu with new eyes, eyes filled with respect and awe. You saved this place, she whispered again, still shaken, and you never wanted anyone to know. Keanu smiled faintly, his eyes soft but tired. It wasn't about me. It was about the children who needed help. If they smiled, that was enough. Sandra felt her throat tighten. She had always admired him as a friend, but tonight she saw the truth behind his silence. It wasn't just humility, it was sacrifice, the kind that few people even understood. They were about to leave when little Ryan came running back, his sketchbook still clutched in his hands. His face was brighter now. He's okay, he said, almost shouting with joy. The doctor said my dad is stable. He asked me to tell you both thank you. he said. Heroes are real. Sandra bent down, hugging the boy tightly. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief and hope. Keanu ruffled the boy's hair gently, smiling in a way that was both proud and humble. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the storm had cleared. The sky was open, dotted with stars, the ground still glistening from the rain. The crowd that had once followed them was gone. It was quiet now, almost sacred. Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice trembling. Tonight, I saw you in a way I never have before. Not the actor, not the star, but the man who gives without asking for anything back. You don't just play a hero on screen, Keanu. You live it. He lowered his head slightly, uncomfortable with praise. I only try to do what I wish the world would do more often. We can't save everyone, but we can touch one life at a time. That's enough. Sandra's heart swelled. She realized that this night had changed something inside her, too. She thought of the times she had hidden her kindness out of fear of being judged, the times she had doubted her strength. But being with Keanu reminded her that humility was not weakness. It was power in its truest form. As they walked toward the car, Sandra paused. You know what people will say about tonight, right? They'll call it a date. They'll make stories out of it. Keanu looked at her, his face calm. Let them. If the world wants to talk, let them talk about kindness. The words hit her like a wave. Simple, honest, and true. Just then, the young woman whose mother they had helped appeared at the hospital door. She waved with tears of joy, her mother now sitting in a wheelchair beside her, smiling faintly under the hospital lights. The woman's voice carried across the lot. Thank you for giving me my mother back. Behind her, Ryan and his father stood together too, the father weak but smiling, holding the boy's drawing. Their eyes met Keanu and Sandra's, and no words were needed. Gratitude filled the air like music. Sandra felt her chest swell with emotion. She looked at Keanu, her voice breaking. Tonight didn't just touch them. It touched me too. You reminded me of who I want to be. Keanu gave her a soft smile. And you reminded me that we don't have to walk through storms alone. They got into the car, and as they drove away, the city lights glimmered like stars on the wet pavement. The night that had begun as a simple dinner had become something else entirely, a story of kindness, humility, and resilience that would never be forgotten. For those who saw it, it wasn't about romance or fame or gossip. It was about two souls choosing to show the world that even in storms, even under cameras, even in moments of fear, kindness still shines brightest. The legacy of one night, the city was quiet as Keanu and Sandra drove away from the hospital. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and cool. Sandra rested her head lightly against the seat, her thoughts swirling. The night had been full of tests, and yet every challenge had shown her something new, not about fame or fear, but about the strength of humility and the beauty of kindness. Keanu kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Though his face was calm, his heart was heavy with reflection. He had not planned for any of this. He had only wanted to share a simple dinner with a friend, but life had turned it into something greater. After a long silence, Sandra spoke softly. Do you realize what happened tonight? It wasn't just about us, those people we met. The boy, the young woman, her mother, even the strangers in the crowd. They will never forget it. You gave them hope. Keanu shook his head gently. We gave them hope. You stood by me every moment. You showed the same kindness. People saw us together, and they'll remember not the cameras, but the way we chose to act. Her lips curved into a soft smile. Maybe that's true. But still, Keanu, you carry something rare. Most people let pain harden them. You let it make you softer. That's what touches everyone. The words lingered in the quiet car. Keanu lowered his eyes for a moment, not out of pride, but out of humility. They soon reached a quiet overlook above the city, where the lights below glowed like fallen stars. Keanu parked, and they both stepped out, breathing in the cool night air. The world felt far away up there, peaceful and endless. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself, then looked at him with eyes full of sincerity. Can I ask you something? He nodded. What keeps you going? She asked. After everything, the losses, the loneliness, the pain, what makes you keep giving when no one is watching? Keanu took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Because I know how it feels to have nothing, to feel forgotten. If I can make even one person feel less alone, then my pain wasn't wasted. Maybe that's what life is, turning what breaks us into something that heals others. Sandra felt tears well in her eyes. She had no words. She simply stepped closer and placed her hand over his. For a long moment, they stood together in silence. Two souls carrying different scars, yet finding comfort in the same truth. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the quiet. Footsteps. They turned to see the young boy, Ryan, walking toward them with his father by his side. The father looked pale but stronger than before, leaning gently on his son. They had followed to find them, their faces glowing in the moonlight. "I had to say this again," the father said, his voice weak but steady. "You didn't just save my boy from fear tonight. You saved me. I saw his courage come alive because of your words. I'll never forget that." Ryan stepped forward, handing Keanu his sketchbook. On the last page, he had drawn Keanu and Sandra standing together under the rain, helping strangers. At the bottom, he had written in uneven letters, "Real heroes are kind." Keanu's throat tightened. He looked at Sandra, then back at the boy. "This means more than you know. Keep drawing, Ryan. Keep showing the world your heart." The boy nodded, his eyes shining. His father placed a hand over his heart in silent thanks before they walked away into the night. Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice breaking. "You see? This is your legacy. Not movies, not fame, not headlines. This, the lives you touch without even trying." Keanu gave a small smile, his eyes glistening. "Then let it be our legacy. Because tonight, you were right beside me." They stood together, watching the city below. The night had started as a simple dinner, but it had become something unforgettable. It had become proof that even in a world filled with noise and chaos, kindness could still shine through. And though the world would call it a date, though headlines would twist it into gossip, those who truly saw it, the boy, the woman, her mother, the crowd, and Sandra herself, knew the truth. It was never about romance or rumors. It was about two people reminding the world of something far more powerful.